This video will cover some examples in lesson 5.2. In these examples, we are going to be identifying corresponding parts. And so we are going to be heading to page 131 in your student journal. All right, on page 131, it says in exercises 1 and 2, identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts. Then write another congruent statement for the polygons. So we have in number 1, 2 congruent triangles. It tells us triangle PQR is congruent to triangle STU. And so remember, the order of the letters in this congruent statement matters. The order helps us identify which parts in this triangle are congruent to, which means they correspond to the parts in this triangle. And so it might be helpful to use some colors to help match up corresponding parts. So what I mean by that is, let's look in our first triangle, triangle PQR. P and Q are next to each other. So I'm going to label side PQ with, I'm going to highlight it in red. Its corresponding part over here, if I look in this triangle name, S and T are next to each other first. So PQ corresponds to side ST. I'm going to highlight them with the same color. I'm going to do the same thing with the other sides. Okay. QR, side QR. This is the side that's in between the one arc and the two arcs. So I would expect over here, TU, that is also the side over here in between the one arc and the two arcs. So these are my corresponding sides. And I'll do blue. And then finally, side PR corresponds to SU. So now we're going to go ahead and name the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides. So the angles that are corresponding are the angles that are congruent. I can see from the picture, angle R is congruent to angle U because they both have one arc. So I'm going to say angle R is congruent to angle U. Angle Q and angle T are congruent. Oops, I meant to put Q first. And then angle P and angle S. Okay. If they didn't have the arcs in the picture, you could still tell which angles were congruent by looking at the order of the letters. P came first, S came first. Those are the two angles that are congruent. Q came next, T came next. That was the other pair of congruent angles. And then finally, R and U came last. Those were congruent angles. So you can use the picture and you can also use the order of the letters. Let's go ahead and name our corresponding sides now. Let's start with side PQ. We said that is corresponding to ST. So that means line segment PQ is congruent to line segment ST. Make sure the order matches. So P is corresponding to S, so those both came first, and Q and T are corresponding. Those have to come second. Let's go ahead and name the purple sides. Line segment QR is congruent to line segment TU. Make sure T comes first because T matches with U. And then lastly, our blue sides, PR, line segment PR is congruent to line segment SU. Make sure S comes first because S matches with P. So I've named all the corresponding parts. Now they want me to write another congruent statement, which just means I need to rewrite that these triangles are congruent, but I am going to choose a different order for the letters. So I could say triangle QRP is congruent to, so let me double check. Q corresponds to T, so I'm going to put T first. R corresponds to U, and P corresponds to S. So the proper order, if I'm going to write triangle QRP, would be triangle TUS. We can do the same thing with these quadrilaterals in number 2. They don't have to be triangles. So it tells us quadrilateral ABCD is congruent to quadrilateral EFGH. I'll go ahead and I'm going to use the arcs to name the corresponding angles. So angle A has 3 arcs. It corresponds to angle E because angle E also has 3 arcs. So angle E is congruent to angle A. Angle B has 2 arcs, so it must be congruent to angle F. Angle C has 1 arc, so it must be congruent to angle G. And finally, angle D has 4 arcs, so it must be congruent to angle H. And you can always double check the order. A and E match, B and F, C and G, D and H. Now for the sides, I'll go to side AB first. Looking at the order, it should correspond to side EF. And I can see we've got 3 arcs and 2 arcs, 3 arcs and 2 arcs. Those match. So for my corresponding sides, I'm going to say line segment AB is congruent to line segment EF. We'll do BC next. 2 arcs, 1 arc. Matches with this side. So line segment BC is congruent to line segment FG. Line segment DC, 1 arc, 4 arcs. So line segment CD is congruent to line segment GH. And I need one more. I'm running out of space. So my last one, line segment AD and EH. Make sure the order is correct. So AD, line segment AD is congruent to line segment EH. E has to come first because it corresponds to A. So to write a new congruent statement, I just need to change up the order. So I could say quadrilateral DCBA is congruent to, let's see, D corresponds to H, C corresponds to G, B corresponds to F, and A corresponds to E. So I could have written the congruent statement in that order and it would have worked the same.